please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
Well, the RBI Governor Urjit Patel has broken his silence over the PNB fraud. Now, in a speech delivered at the National Law University, Gandhinagar, Patel defended the RBI and said that it's simply not feasible for a banking regulator to be in every nook and corner of the banking activity. He went on to add that RBI's regulatory powers over the PSU banks are weaker than those of private sector banks. Ritu Singh joins us with more details on Governor Patel's defense. Ritu, take us through the highlights of Mr. Patel's speech.
This is the first time that RBI Governor Urjit Patel has broken his silence on the Punjab National Bank fraud, after which several fingers were pointed at Reserve Bank of India for its lack of supervisory control and not detecting this fraud in time. But the Reserve Bank of India, in a very emotional speech, has also hit out saying you cannot blame the Reserve Bank of India alone, especially when regulatory powers over public sector banks are not completely in the hands of RBI. He began by saying on the Punjab National fraud that it was simply infeasible for the Reserve Bank of India to be in every nook and corner of the country to detect every fraud, although some might argue 12,000 is a big enough figure for the Reserve Bank of India to have been in the know. RBI also said it had issued precise instructions thrice in 2016 on these cybersecurity risks, and it was Punjab National Bank's internal failure to not have recognized those risks and worked on them to plug the loopholes, which is why the fraud has happened. He also said that the RBI's regulatory power over public sector banks is weak and not at the same level as its regulatory powers over private banks, given that the regulation of public sector banks is partially also in the hands of the Finance Ministry, and given this deep fissure in the landscape of Indian banking regulatory regime, there was bound to be tremors felt in the form of the fraud that we have seen. He said the market discipline mechanism for public sector banks is much weaker compared to private banks, which is why there are more instances of fraud in public sector banks versus private sector banks. He also said now there is a need to refocus away from this fraud, but also on the stressed asset problem that has been building up. He said the stressed asset magnitude is larger than the 8.5 lakh crore rupee stress that is visible on bank balance sheets, and that the Reserve Bank of India is working to counter that through its policies like the divergence norms that it had introduced recently. They also, RBI Governor also came out in defense of the new NPA regulation scheme, also, something that has been criticized by several industry experts, saying that at the heart of this new framework for NPA resolution, that is the 12th February circular, is IBC, which he says is one of the best regulations to have come out in the last several decades, and that will help ensure that banking NPAs come down in the future, and it breaks the nexus between the bankers and the borrowers. Lastly, there were some suggestions for revitalizing public sector banks, where he's blamed, partially the onus on the government, which is the owner of public sector banks, saying they must consider privatization in not so many words. What he said is there is a need for a level playing field between public and private sector banks, and the government must inform itself about optimizing the best use of scarce national resources and consider making banking regulatory powers neutral to bank ownership.
Still tuned into Power Breakfast on CNBC TV18. Well, Wipro will be in focus today after it will divest the data center services business to a US-based company, Ensono, for $405 million. Reema is here with more details on this. Reema.
Hi, Ekta. Good morning. Yes, the news for Wipro is, and a positive one at that they have divested their hosted data center business for $405 million to Ensono. Now, this was a part of an acquisition that they did in 2007 of InfoCrossing, wherein they had acquired 3 entities. 2 of the entities, that's Medicare as well as Medicaid services, are integrated in Wipro. This hosted data services business is what they have divested, and the key reason for that is it was not doing so well. For one, this business itself has been disrupted on account of cloud technology. So we understand, while the company is not officially given out the revenues as well as the margins that this particular entity contributed, we understand that the margins would be lower than that of IT services. So in that sense, it would be an EPS accretive business, because the business per se, the model, has been disrupted on account of cloud technology. Separately, the company will also be making a strategic investment of $55 million in Ensono's combined entity. Axis believe that this deal will be a positive because it is hiving off an ailing data center business because their clients have migrated to cloud. They expect the deal to be margin as well as earnings accretive because the data center business will have lower margins than IT services. Morgan Stanley estimates that the annual revenues from this particular business was just $241 million, which is 3%, only 3% of Wipro's overall IT revenue. So therefore, this deal is immaterial from a financial standpoint, but it will help the company become leaner and get its focus back on the key growth area, that's digital services. Wipro, what they are most heartened with is they believe that their company has managed to sell this business at a PE multiple of 26 times. For a business which is getting disrupted, they believe that they've managed to get a fairly good value. Back to you.
We've been talking about the equity markets. Let's shift focus to the commodity space. Manisha Gupta joins us as always. Hey Manisha, good morning.
Hey Nigel, good morning. Well, we have seen some gains come back for many of those commodities. The data that came in from China has been positive, and that still is supporting the prices. So you have the metals as a space trading in the positive. The gold prices have seen some strength come back into them as well. It is the crude prices, though, which have seen some pressure. While you saw a huge buildup in the U.S. crude inventories, but there also was a decline in stocks and inventories of gasoline and distillates. So it was a mixed data, and that has kept the crude prices from falling too much. But it was the OPEC report which says that the non-OPEC supplies will continue to increase by 1.6 million barrels per day for the rest of 2018. So that's a bit of a concern. And it's not just the U.S. shale output, but you have seen increase in supplies coming from countries like Brazil, Canada, UK, China, etc. And that is what is adding to the global supplies. So the markets as we see it right now for crude really are going to be range bound between 58 to 63 as it has been holding for the U.S. crude oil prices. More important, of course, to watch now would be the next week's U.S. Fed meeting where 25 basis point of a rate hike has been factored in. So that really is the major event now for next 10-15 days. That is where you would get your major cues from.
Okay, all right, Manisha. Thanks very much for that. Well, let's go across to Manglam now, who joins in with all the cues from the F&O space. Manglam, over to you.
Well, good morning, Ekta. Yesterday was a very choppy day for our indices, and if one was confused as to which way the markets are going, the F&O data that came by did not help either, because from the cash market, the one thing that stood out was both the FIIs and the DIIs pulled out some money to the tune of almost 500 crore rupees. If you take a look at, rather 600 crore rupees, if you take a look at what both the institutions did. But in index futures, the FIs, they sold a very small amount, about 240 crores. Yes, there were more shorts added, but then again, 54% long versus 55% long, not big in terms of directional cues. In index options, there was a purchase of close to around 330 crore rupees. Majority of that was towards buying of index puts, but then again, there was a lot of volatility as far as that data point is concerned, because today, remember, is the Nifty Bank weekly options expiry as well. So let's take a look at a few active options. Overall, for the Nifty, 10,000 put as well as the 10,500 call have the maximum open interest, so that is the broad range that the smart money is working with. Yesterday, it tightened the screw on the 10,400 call. Those option writers got aggressive as far as the writing is concerned. 117 rupees premium on the 10,400 call. 10,100 put to saw some open interest added. The Nifty Bank, 150 points from either side where it is right now is where the key markers are. 25,000 call and 24,700 put on the lower end. Keep an eye out on a lot of these stocks which have entered the F&O ban, because the stocks in the F&O ban are the ones which are moving quite a bit. And yesterday we had Bank India and TV18 broadcast with, of course, the standard disclaimer entering the F&O ban.
Okay, all right. Thanks so much for that, Manglam. Well, with that, we wrap up on Power Breakfast, but we leave you with the picks of our bullseye contestants for day 4 of the week. Bazaar Morning Call comes up after that.
Buy call in Glenmark Pharma with stop loss below 540 for target around 585. My second call is a buy call in TV18 broadcast with stop loss below 64.5 for target around 73. My third call is a buy call in Indian Bank with stop loss below 292 for target around 325. And my last pick is a buy call in Persistent Systems with stop loss below 825 for target around 893.
Buy Titan, stop loss 797.80, target 874. Buy KPIT Tech, stop loss 217.80, target 245. Buy TV18, stop loss 62.60, target 75. Buy Pidilite, stop loss 883, target 943.
The first buy recommendation is on Wockhardt Pharma. One can buy Wockhardt Pharma for a target of 825 with a stop loss of 762. The second buy recommendation is on Canara Bank. One can buy Canara Bank for a target of 274 with a stop loss of 252. The third buy recommendation is on Kajaria Ceramics. One can buy Kajaria Ceramics for a target of 587 with a stop loss of 557. And the final buy recommendation is on Bank of India. One can buy Bank of India for a target of 115 with a stop loss of 97.90.